How many teams were in play for Micah Parsons?
I think the number was it was six. And at the very end, maybe less, but there were six that were involved. And the Cowboys took what they felt like was the best offer. Now, I think that the thing that people are missing here, and I think this is a really interesting nuance to it, is that there's a bigger picture thought here for Dallas and what they're doing. And I'm not going to tell you that they didn't want to re-sign Micah. They did. But when things broke down in the spring, they had a series of conversations about like, okay, like what are we trying to do here? We haven't been to an NFC championship game, let alone a Super Bowl in 29 years. That's the third longest drought in the NFL. Yet I think they're top 10, top seven or eight, maybe in wins over that same period. So you've been consistently really good, but never good enough, right? Like at the end. And I think with a new head coach now, Brian Schottenheimer started to look in the mirror a little bit about it, and it was like, okay, like, so if we are going to get to a point where we're going to trade Micah Parsons, is there some sort of pivot we want to make here? And that pivot wound up being we want to like really lean in on what Brian Schottenheimer is trying to build here, which you've heard him use the phrase, the greatest culture in professional sports. And maybe that's a little bit of hyperbole, but like that's the idea of what they're trying to do there. And then you look at their first two draft picks in April, and it was two guys who are just middle of the fairway from a makeup and character standpoint. And Tyler Booker from Alabama and Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, really productive college players who are really great people. And then you look at what Dallas did here, right? Like, which not all six of the teams had two first round picks on the table, but the rough ask was two first round picks and a player that can be useful for us. And the Cowboys actually asked for Kenny Clark. And I think the Packers were taken aback a little bit by that, thinking like, well, they lost DeMarcus Lawrence. They're losing Micah Parsons here. We thought maybe they'd want an edge player. And Packers people were heartbroken, like losing Kenny Clark, right? The reason why is because of the person he is. And I think that was a huge part. That was a huge part of why Dallas asked specifically for him, because it's leaning into what they're trying to build and leaning into that whole we're going to have the greatest culture in the NFL thing. And maybe that'll be the difference maker for us. Now, will it work? We'll see. But in drafting Booker and drafting Ezeraku and now bringing in Kenny Clark, I think they're kind of looking at it and saying, how can we make the locker room the best locker room in the NFL? And how can we empower Dak Prescott to be the leader of the team? And we'll see how all of that works out. But Micah Parsons didn't really fit into that. Now, again, they wanted to re-sign him. I'm not saying they didn't want to re-sign him. But the idea was if we do move on from this guy, what are we going to do? And I think you see a pretty clear vision for what they're going to do on the field with the run stopping stuff that they've said a million times now, but also off the field.
Yeah, but you don't bring in George Pickens if you're talking about the locker room.
Yeah, but that's for a year.
Okay. But
now
you can stop the run. Now, can you stop the pass? Like,
right. And I understand. I understand there's a lot of that, right? Like in the Pickens things, that's a good rebuttal. There's no question. Like that's a big risk for them, but that's for a year and you'll see where that goes. And in the meantime, like they are able to take that money and sign some of their own guys. Deron Bland's one who's got done over the last couple of days. Tyler Smith's another. A real like foundation piece for them on the offensive line that they plan to re-sign. Like these things would be more difficult if you had Micah Parsons making between $45 and $50 million a year. So again, like I think there's just sort of a big picture idea here in the way that they're going to handle it. And
yeah, but Kenny Clark helps you now, but you don't need help now. He's not the future. You're getting two first-round picks. I mean, how did Jamal Adams got three? There was three first-round picks for Jamal Adams for the Jets. Like I just don't understand. If I look at some of these other players who've been traded, defensive players,
yeah,
you got a lot more for these guys.
And I think that to me is another valid criticism is like, if you were talking about this in March and April, right, then you should have created the tension point with your player then. And I think that piece of it to me is really important because if you are putting Micah Parsons on the market in March and April, there's way more of a market for him. It's tough to trade a guy right before the start of the season. Teams' budgets are set, their caps are set, their rosters are set. Like when you're talking about bringing in a player of this magnitude, like that's a big thing. The capital that you got to fork over for him and the contract you got to fork over, like that's a lot. And if you're looking at the idea of this and you say put them on the market in March or April, well, then you're probably going to have more teams involved because more teams are going to, sort of have stayed loose at that point with an ability to pivot and make moves at certain positions that you wouldn't be able to make in the summer. And then, like you're also the other benefit of doing it then is that you're actually going to get one of those picks on your team this year. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
instead of having to wait until 26 and 27 to have those guys on your team, like whatever picks you get in 25, now those guys are going to help you right now. So I think that's a very valid criticism that they shouldn't have let this thing linger. They shouldn't have let it go through camp. 100% I'm with you on that. Like that's a fair criticism. And they should have reached this tension point with Micah Parsons and David Mulugeta and all the people in that camp way earlier than they did.